Male concubinage, the practice of keeping young boys and men as sexual companions in the court, was a long-standing tradition in many ancient cultures. In the Ottoman Empire, male concubinage was accepted and celebrated as a symbol of wealth, power, and masculinity. Records showed that even Roman gladiators fell in love with one another, and you know what happened next? This proves that gladiators even engaged in non-combat activities outside of the Colosseum. It's common for slaves to participate in the past. Romans enjoyed seeing individuals fight, even to the death, as a kind of entertainment. Romans also enjoy pleasure-seeking activities, which is why they enjoy taking their time in love and intimate relationships in addition to cheering within the Colosseum. Even though strength, power, and masculinity were highly valued in classical Roman society, there is evidence that a sizable population of homosexual gladiators participated in same-gender relationships despite these traditional gender norms. Naturally, things are not always easy, and they occasionally face harsh penalties. How horrible was it to be gay in ancient Rome, then? Let's investigate. Here at History Rediscovered, we present to you the most bizarre historical facts from human history. Viewer discretion is required as some of the topics covered in this video may be rude or upsetting. Homosexuality among Roman gladiators. Historical evidence, ancient Rome's art and literature give way to the sexual relations between the gladiators. The term, gladiator, comes from the Latin word for swordsman. Many Romans believed these fighters had to be sexually active to be strong and brave in battle. Philosophers have elevated and seen homosexuality as a noble and honorable form of romantic love. The emergence of love and sex in the queer community is, in fact, partially due to the Romans. Despite the imperfections in their approach, it was grim and dirty and occasionally just as romantic. Writings on Roman love extol the sublimity and aesthetic characteristics of masculine appeal, but when their sensual practices are described with terms like lust and disgusting obsceneness, that's another story. To them, true love was not shown in Roman homosexuality. Rather, it was displayed via wild. It frequently has connections to the infamous Emperor Nero, who was a hedonistic monarch who wed both genders. A man who, so the story goes, preferred to be entered by his attractive husband rather than having his body pierced additionally. Writers such as Catullus, whose works contain both graphic imagery and sweet love poetry for both men and women, and the poets Juvenal and Martial were repeatedly targeted for obscenity, were criticized by historians for their juvenile and martial themes. Petronius' book The Satyricons became synonymous with Roman decadence. This was due to the fact that demonizing Roman vices was useful. In this way, the virtue of Greek homosexuality was highlighted, and a similarly virtuous gloss was applied to those who denounced Rome's immoral actions. But the Romans offered a good example for those who did not feel the need to apologize for their desires, and a lot of examples were written in history books for everyone to see and read. Speaking of Nero, a drama depicting one of the most well-known love tales between two gladiators was presented to him. I'll be sharing more information about these gladiators later on, so stay tuned if you're interested in learning who they are. For the time being, though, let's travel back in time and talk about these warriors' homosexuality and the things they do out of love, pleasure, and fulfillment. Roman gladiators' homosexuality. Roman literature and art are subordinated to the sexual exchanges between gladiators. It is only reasonable that the majority of these warriors attempt to be sexually active, as many Romans thought that in order for these men to be powerful and fearless in battle, they needed to be sexually active. It should be noted that the majority of gladiators were either former slaves or prisoners who had received death sentences. As such, it was expected that many of these men were under the control of their owners and that their opportunities for sexual relations with women were limited at best. As a result, they acted in the most practical way to satiate their desires. Remarkably, they became romantically or sexually involved with each other. According to scholarly research, the majority of gladiators like to fight in groups. Specifically, a group of 4 to 6 fighters would seize a recruit before the group penetrated him. To put it plainly, we don't know from history whether this was done voluntarily or under duress. We are aware, nevertheless, that sexist strategies attempted to teach the recruit how to cope with pain in the future. Additionally, gladiators' masters give them orders to fight one another. Gladiators were sometimes instructed to perform this while their masters watched, but this was not always the case in ancient Rome. It can get a touch too graphic at times. People would cover themselves in gladiators' blood before having sex because it was thought that their blood represented sexual prowess. In fact, Emperor Marcus Aurelius performed the same act when he killed Gladiator while having sex with his wife Faustina and covered her with the victim's blood. According to legend, Commodus, the son of Marcus Aurelius, was born only after this event, and anyone hoping to have a child would have to take a gladiator's life and use their blood as a substitute. One of the best-known stories about homosexuality among Roman gladiators is this one. There is more to their story that should be told, even if history books focus mostly on their well-known combat inside the Colossus. Much is unknown about Priscus and Varus, much like the stories of Priscus and Varus. But the final struggle they fought was well recorded. The audience was left in shock as they watched on the edge of their seats as the intense conflict raged on for hours. Both fighters were ultimately spared. Emperor Titus gave them each the rudest, a little wooden blade that was given to retiring gladiators as a sign of their independence, and the audience applauded them for being free men. They both exited the arena side by side, and most people assumed that there was more than friendship between the two. There are even rumors that their closeness was caused by a romantic relationship they had during their training. Although same-sex partnerships amongst warriors were very permissive in ancient Rome, those who cross the line nevertheless face consequences. This is mostly due to the fact that, like any other free and honorable Roman male of standing, the bellum Hispanians, Roman soldiers were expected to practice restraint when it came to sexual behavior. An officer who was on the campaign with a male concubine was mentioned in a book on the Caesar Civil War. Augustus extended his ban on army marriages to include incidents of this nature. For almost 2 centuries, the imperial army was prohibited from using this. During the Republic, homosexual behavior by other troops was subject to harsh penalties as a violation of military discipline, and at worst, soldiers were executed for having sex. A soldier who volunteered for penetration would be punished with a fustuarium, or club to death, according to Polybius, who lived in the 2nd century BC. Roman historians have warning stories of officers coercing soldiers into having sex against their will and then suffering horrendous consequences. The newest officers might still had some of the youthful charms that Romans cherished in male-male partnerships, so they were advised to emphasize their manly qualities by not wearing perfume and shaving their underarm and nasal hair. An incident that Plutarch recounts in his biography of Marius serves as evidence of the soldier's right to maintain his sexual integrity in the face of pressure from his superiors. At the time the narrative was written, Marius's nephew Gaius Lucius, Trebonius's superior commander, had harassed him sexually. Trebonius was an attractive young recruit. Trebonius had refused offers from strangers on several occasions before he was summoned to Lucius's tent one evening. After being subjected to a sexual assault, he was forced to follow his superior's orders and used his sword to kill Lucius. Normally, those found guilty of killing an officer would be executed, but Trebonius was exempt from this rule. There are still a few stories in Roman history that didn't end well, but at the end of the day, they are stories worth telling. Trebonius was cleared of murdering his relative. Marius also awarded him a crown for valor after he was able to call witnesses during his trial to demonstrate that he had to frequently fend off Lucius and had never prosecuted his body to anyone despite offers of costly gifts. The truth about homosexuality among Roman gladiators is that it was a common and accepted part of their culture. While some discriminated against or disapproved of same-sex relationships, they were in the minority. Romans celebrated and admired homosexuality as a natural expression of love and desire. They viewed a gladiator's sexual relationships as just one aspect of their masculinity and strength. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below and hit like on this. I'll see you in the next one, and please subscribe.